topic of today's class. Good evening, Erica. The topic is, are humans inferior to animals? And good evening, Jane. Good evening, Jennifer. Good evening, Chaya. Good evening, Mendel. It's about to be live on all the platforms here. Good evening from Norway, and we are live there. And we're just gonna go like this. Good evening, Roberto. Erev Tov. One more share, and we're good to go. Share to a page. Good evening from Puerto Rico. Gibba Cook from Allah Zayt. They're watching from everywhere. Norway and Puerto Rico. What a beautiful night. So one night, I'm not even worried about people in Puerto Rico watching. Look at my sky. Look at my weather. I could beat you, Puerto Rico, tonight. It's about one night a year I can do that. So I'm glad I could. Good evening, Jim. Okay, and we are getting into it. So we find ourselves in Parshas Tazria. It is 3 weeks and 2 days to Pesach, but we find ourselves in the book of Leviticus, in the book of Vayikra, in the portion of Tazria, the fourth portion, which is chapter 12, verse 1. And almost the entirety of the portion of Tazria talks about impurity of humans. So it talks about primarily Saras. Saras, for those that aren't familiar, is a form of leprosy, but not the medical definition of leprosy. It's not leprosy the doctors have medication for. It's not something that you go into quarantine for because someone might catch it from you. It's not contagious. It's a divine plague that would plague various aspects in a person's life. First, it would plague the walls of their house. Then it would plague the garments of their clothing and the vessels in their home. And if they still didn't get the memo from God, eventually their skin, they had to go out of all three encampments of the Jewish people into the they were excommunicated in a sense, in total isolation. And until the Kohen prescribes them to be pure again, they remain in isolation. Primarily, they were punished due to Lashon Hara, speaking negatively about other humans. Not only, but primarily. It also talks in the beginning of the Torah portion about impurity associated with childbirth. If it's a boy, if it's a girl, the Torah has different opinions about, not different opinions, the Torah has different rules for whether you give birth to a boy, a female, or a male, to what level of impurity you have. But it's all about human impurity. So there's two things I'd like to discuss today that are really interconnected. And what I share with you tonight from beginning to end is from a Farbrengen, from a talk of the Rebbe in the Parshas Tazria, this week's Torah portion. Is my network low? Can you guys see me? Because I'm outside. I want to make sure. Okay, good. It said my bandwidth was low. I just wanted to make sure. So whoever's using my bandwidth should get off my bandwidth so we'll have more power. So the talk that I shared tonight is from 19, let me just make sure I got the right year. I think it's 65. Yeah, the spring of 1965, the Rebbe addressed this discussion of Tazria in the following way. Number one, the name of a Torah portion is very much connected to the content of the Torah portion. So first and foremost, we have to understand why the portion that talks primarily about Saras, about someone that's plagued with leprosy, with the spiritual form of leprosy, but nevertheless leprosy, why would it be called Tazria, which means a woman who's conceiving? Conceiving is about birth. Conceiving is about renewal. Conceiving is about new life, creativity, creation. You're creating a new child. You're bringing a new child to the world. And yet the majority of the Torah portion doesn't talk about childbirth. It talks about leprosy, Saras. So what's the correlation between the name and the Parsha? And if you're saying that because it's the first, if you're going to say that it's because it's the first primary word that's used in the first verses of the Torah portion, right? If you look at the Torah portion, it says, "Vaydaber Hashem Moshe Lamer." God spoke to Moses, saying, "Daber Bnei Yisrael Lamer," speak to the children of Israel, saying, "Isha ki Tazria." If a woman gives, if a woman conceives, the Yolda Zachar, and gives birth to a male, to a son. So if you'll say, well, we wanted to pick the primary word that's an indication of the first unusual word in the introduction to the Torah portion, then it should have been called the portion of Isha, the portion of a woman, because the first word is Isha ki Tazria, a woman who conceives. Why would you call the entire portion conception, right? We are now going to read the Torah portion of conception. Then you start reading, okay, there's a few verses about childbirth, and then you read about leprosy for 55 verses over there. What's the connection there? And why would it be called Tazria when the content doesn't match up? But the question becomes even stronger, and this is based on the Medrash. And Rashi quotes the Medrash. And he says as follows, very, very powerful Medrash. Amar Rabbi Simloi, Rabbi Simloi said, Kishem sheyitzirase shel adam achar kol behema chayav v'oiv v'maisa bereshis. Just like when you look at the creation of the world in the 6 days of creation in the book of Genesis, human beings are created after all the animals, both domesticated and wild animals and all birds, right? First day of creation, second day, third, fourth, fifth day, you have the animal, right? Then the 6th day, more of the other creations are mentioned. What's the last thing God creates in the 6 days of creation? Right before Shabbos, a few hours before the first Sabbath, God creates the first human being, Adam, and from Adam he creates Eve. So the first couple is created as the last creation on the 6 days of creation was Adam and Eve. So when does the human come into the creation process? After everyone else. And Rashi says, quoting Rabbi Simloi, that just like in creation, human beings come after the animal kingdom, so too here in the book of Leviticus, when we're studying the human condition, the animal. Very simple. If you look, the first 3 portions of the book of Leviticus, Vayikra, Tzav, and Shmini, talk about animal sacrifice, about offerings. And in the context of that, it talks about this animal is wholesome, this one's blemished, this one you sprinkle the blood this way and that way, but it talks about the wholesomeness, the completeness of the animal in order to be offered on the altar. So first 3 Torah portions of Leviticus talk about the animals. Then comes the 4th portion, and finally we're talking about the human blemishes, the human impurity, the human purity, tuma, tara of human beings. Why? Why do humans come after animals? So the animal rights lovers would say, what do you mean why? Because humans are human beings. Look, they make trouble. They make, the animals are delicious. They're wonderful. They're this incredible, cozy, yummy, amazing, right? But we're Jews. So even if that's true, that dogs are sometimes way more cuddly than humans, and I'll be the first to admit that, that's not, that we have to understand what Rabbi Simloi in the Medrash meant when he said that just like during the 6 days of creation, human beings were created last. Is that a good thing or a bad thing that human beings were created last? Is a sign of inferior? Is it because humans are inferior to animals or because they're superior to animals?
Or were they an afterthought after everything?
Oh, well, that would mean that they would be inferior to animals. So this is where it gets interesting. So Rashi quotes the Medrash from Rabbi Simloi. And it's not that we're learning, right? If you look at the language of the Medrash, we're not learning the order of humans coming after animals from the 6 days of creation. That's not what Rashi says. He says, Kishem, just like during creation, humans came after animals, so too in the Torah, when we're discussing human completeness, human blemishes, human wholesomeness, we discuss it after animals. Now, when it comes to creation, there's 2 opinions. One opinion is that the reason animals come before the humans is because animals are superior to humans. In what sense are animals superior to humans? I don't want you guys to get misunderstood, like Chaz v'Shalom, like the Nazis, God forbid, who treated animals better than humans. That's not what I'm saying in any stretch of the imagination. The Medrash says that there is one way in which animals are superior to humans, and that is that animals don't choose evil. Animals don't have an evil bone in their body. Human beings have the ability to choose to be evil. God gave human beings this unique gift. We can choose. I gave you life and death, good and bad. God says, please choose life. Please choose goodness. Please choose morality. Please choose ethics. Animals don't have that option. Animals are robotic in the sense that what they're capable of wanting and liking and doing is very much based on how God created them. Singular. They don't make choices of good and bad. It's not even good and bad isn't even a concept that was created for them. It was created for human beings. They can choose things. Of course, they have choice, but it's not a choice between good and evil. Maybe it's a choice between making a smart decision and a not smart decision. Maybe it's a choice between being protective of their owners and not being protective. Maybe they're not doing what they were trained to do, but they don't inherently choose, wake up one morning and say, ooh, let's choose to follow temptation and be evil today. Animals don't do that. And in that sense, human beings are inferior to animals because we, unfortunately, choose evil all the time. Just look what's going on in Mariupol, and you'll know that human beings are capable of choosing evil. That's one opinion in the Medrash, that human beings were created after animals because animals have something superior to the human. So much so that the famous line from the Medrash is that if a person misbehaves, when a person chooses evil, you know what we tell them? Yitush kadmach, a mosquito was created before you. Imagine that that humbling experience when you remind, the president of the United States or the Queen of England. You say, "Hey, Bubala, I just want you to know that mosquitoes were created before the humans. So as arrogant as you think you are, mosquitoes came before you." It's quite a humbling experience. And in that sense, human beings, because we choose evil at sometimes, or choose temptation, or choose wrong, we have an inferiority situation as it relates to animals. But the second opinion in the Medrash is, no. Second opinion is that when you make a meal, right, if you're inviting guests, we do it every week. You invite guests to your home for a meal. You don't invite them, and then while they're standing in your kitchen, say, "Oh, I'm so sorry. It's going to be a couple of hours now. We're going to start cooking for the meal." If you're inviting guests to be honorable guests in your home, you make the meal before they get there. You make sure everything's ready to roll, the table's set, the food's ready, and then you tell them, "Be here at 7 o'clock for dinner." Don't say, "Come here at 7 o'clock for dinner," and then start the production of producing everything. If you respect the people you're hosting, as I hope you would, you prepare everything before in advance. And if that's the case, the second opinion of the Medrash is quite the contrary. No, animals are not superior to humans. You want to know why animals were created before humans? Because when you make a party and you have a special guest, in this case, the guest being Adam and Eve, you make sure that everything's ready before them. And once everything's ready, then you say, "Oh, now we have to bring the guests of honor, which are Adam and Eve." So they didn't come last because they're inferior. They came last because they're superior. Two opinions in the Medrash, each one going totally in a different direction. And it's hard to reconcile the two, especially if you take them, bring it out to our Torah portion. In our Torah portion, where we're talking about the human condition, where we choose impurity, we choose things that make us impure, choose things that make us pure, blemishes, both physical and spiritual, emotional, mental. How do you relate to human beings when it comes to that? Is the fact that human beings and their impurity is mentioned in the fourth Torah portion a sign of our inferiority or a sign of our superiority? The animal sacrifices that came in the 3 portions in Leviticus prior to this week's Torah portion, was that because the animals come before us, or because let's get the animals out of the way and then let's get to what really matters, which is the human being? What if I told you that they're both true and actually they work perfectly well together? This was this incredible novel idea that the Rebbe addressed in this particular talk. In the human condition, there's what's stronger and then there's what's deeper. Let me try to give an analogy. I was trying before the class to think of an analogy. Let's see if this works. If I'm very, very tired, if I was very, very tired, there's 2 ways to deal with that. There's an unnatural way that can make me so energized that you wouldn't believe that a human being could be so energized. And then there's a natural way to get energized, but it takes a lot more work to get there. So I could either go to the gas station, buy 2 Red Bulls, which Baruch Hashem, I'm proud to say that at the age of 40, I've never drank any of that garbage. You could say that too. Yes, good for you.
At the age of 63.
You too?
Coffee and Red Bull.
No, don't mix coffee and Red Bull. It's not for now.
Never.
So I could go to the gas station and I can go buy some unnatural inducing energizer. And sure, I'll be super energized. You won't even know what to do with the crazy energy. But A, it doesn't last. It only lasts as long as the drugs that I just put into my body, whatever the poison I just put into my body, it stays in my body. But it's not a long-term solution to anything, and it's not healthy. So therefore, it's not deep. It's a superficial form of strength, of empowerment, of energy. Or I could meditate. I could do something internal working, to get to the depth of why I'm so tired, why I'm so lethargic. So either through meditation or through a good night's sleep, a natural form. But if you get it through a natural form, then it's not superficial by any stretch of the imagination. It may not be as exciting as the energy boost you get from the drugs or from the Red Bull, which is the same thing anyhow, but it'll be more deep. It'll be more internalized. It'll be more real for who I am. And so when we talk about spirituality in general, there are two concepts in Hasidic terminology. One is called the Cerusal de la Tata, and one is called the Cerusal de la Ela. One means, the Cerusal de la Tata means an awakening from below, and the other one means an awakening from above. Meaning there's the energy and the gift that God gives us, the superiority that's inherently gifted to creation, and each faction of creation, whether it's the inanimate, the vegetation, the animal kingdom, the human kingdom, the Jewish kingdom, each section of humanity is gifted a different form of a divine energy, but it's coming from the outside and pushing it in. It's not natural to us because we are naturally physical human beings, tempting things that aren't necessarily good for us. And if God gives us a boost of spiritual energy, it's unnatural. It works, but it's unnatural. Then there's Cerusal de la Tata. The Cerusal de la Tata is the awakening from below. And what does that mean, awakening from below? It means when we do the hard work below, in order to awaken everything from above. But it comes through our own work. It's natural, it's deep. It's layers and layers of depth that comes through incredible hard work, but it sticks with us. It has longevity, and it gets rid of the spiritual lethargic experience because it's coming through our efforts. So now let's take these two ideas and look at the chronology of the Torah portion and the chronology of creation. So what it turns out is that the fact that we have an inferiority to the animals is actually our greatest benefit. It's our greatest superiority. So think about what I just said. I want you to pause for a moment. The inferior complex of the human being compared to the animal, the fact that the animal, the mosquito came before us, and therefore we are inferior on some level to the animal, that actually creates our superiority. Say, Rabbi, you're losing your mind. How does the inferiority create the superiority? Because why are we inferior? Because we're a human being that has the ability to choose evil, choose bad. That's why we're inferior to animals. Now imagine if that's our inferiority, that's actually also our greatest superiority. Because when we have the free choice and we choose goodness and we choose betterment and we choose positivity and we choose holiness, then we knock the animals out of the park because we're finally being superior to every other faction of creation. And I want to state something that Hasidus says, unadulterated, clear Hasidus, that when a human being doesn't choose goodness, when a human being doesn't choose holiness, when a human being doesn't choose positivity, they are worse than an animal. Not equal to an animal, they're worse. Because an animal doesn't have the free choice. You do. You could have chosen goodness, and instead you chose negativity. So our inferiority, the fact that we were created after animals, because we do have free choice and we could choose evil, is also the reason why the second opinion in the Medrash that creation came before the guests of honor showed up is because the truth is when a human being chooses to choose good, they end up being superior to everything else. There's nothing that brings God divine pleasure. Nachas ruach lefana, a great pleasure for me. Marty Vanassi were saying that I said to do something and they actually did it. They say, "Oh, it's a great pleasure and aroma to God." When people wake up in the morning and choose, they choose life, that's when we become superior. But if not, indeed, we remain inferior on every level. So now when we look at the name of the Torah portion, why would a Torah portion that talks about leprosy, about Saras, be named Tazria, which means conception, giving birth to new life? Because God sees that choice. When people go through a troublesome experience, like being plagued with leprosy, with Saras, we can either look at ourselves and go, oh boy, woe is to me. I'm isolated, I'm in quarantine, I'm alone, I'm excommunicated, I did make a big mistake, I'm remorseful, but look at me, my life is a worthless, right? The Talmud says, that one of the people that's considered to be like they're dead is a leper. That's how bad it is to go through the spiritual plague of leprosy and the feeling of isolation from the Jewish community. And yet, where does it talk about all these laws of Mitzayir, of Tzaras, in a portion that's called Tazria, that's called that's called conception, birth, because every moment in life, even the ones that seem so troublesome, are all really an opportunity for growth, allowing the human being to become a birther of life, right? To be a creator of life. And when we become creators of life, then we are superior to everything else that's created in the world, because no other creature in the world can create human life besides God. He's the original one who created Adam and human beings. You have a question? I see that look on your face.
I'm just thinking that, and what if you create wonderful beings on top of that?
That's even better, of course.
Good as
But again, those human beings that you create, they have to make their free choice too. And there's no guarantees how that's going to end up. But the idea that if you think about why the Torah emphasized the name Tazria, which means conception, right? Not the word Isha, because it needed you to understand that the goal of the Isha, the goal in the relationship is Tazria. It's the hard work. Tazria in Hebrew could mean conception. It could also mean planting a seed, which just like in the conception of a child is the planting of a seed, the planting of a seed in the ground is also called in Hebrew Tazria. Zoreya, it's one of the 39 prohibitions on Shabbos to plant the seed, to seed the ground, right? And so seeding is a effort. It represents the human being going and doing their part, investing their efforts. And when a human being invests their effort, the sky is the limit. There's nothing that can stop them. It's Cerusal de Lotata, as the Zohar says, the inner effort is unbeatable, right? Again, this is not, I'm not trying to lambast animals. There's actually animals. And that's, but my point about what I'm about to say about animals is factual. Animals, especially domesticated animals, they like sitting. In Yiddish, we call it passion sich in the behemoths. You know what that means? The shepherd to sit around in the field. You ever look at what animals are doing most of the day? They look happy. They look happy in the field near Whitehall when you're driving over the pass over there. They sit a whole day. I don't even know how to translate mepashatzich. Oh, 1 second. My Wi-Fi is having issues here. Please don't disconnect. The Facebook is having a minute here. Let's see if it can reconnect. I know. See if it catches back. I apologize. Chaya, maybe careful. You know what, Mendel? Just walk to the house for a moment and hold it exactly like this backwards. Maybe it'll reconnect, and then I'll let you know. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Don't move. We're back. I apologize for that. I see it's a frozen screen. I'm back, Jane. I'm sorry. It's the risks of doing it outside. But we say passions. An animal is not known to be creative in the sense of creating goodness, right? To create holiness. No, there is no expectation, by the way. You could have the nicest furry animal in the world. You don't have an expectation. No one wakes up in the morning and says, my dog is going to create holiness in the world. They'll bring comfort. They'll bring great things to the family. What? They'll do things that are wonderful. They're not creating holiness. When a human being chooses to create holiness, yes, they were created on the 6th day of creation. Yes, they were last. They were last because they always have the potential of going haywire. Human beings have the potential of really messing things up like you can't imagine. In case you don't believe me, actually, I know you all believe me. Human beings. But the beauty of a human being, and that's why we have that. On the other hand, we are superior. We are the people that are the guests of honor at the party, is because our hard work, when we invest the effort, you know, in our report cards in school, there used to be one of the things they would check off on the report card in my school in All Torah when I went to the Yiddish only, Jewish topic only, no secular studies school, was Shkida v'asmada. Your investment, your effort, and your diligence. And you can get 100 on every test. You can get an A on everything, an Aleph, and still fail when it comes to investment, to effort and diligence, because you're a smart kid. If the teacher is not so smart and you're smart, it's a win-win. You don't have to worry. You get 100 on every test and you didn't invest a finger in kalte Wasser. You didn't even dip your finger into cold water, which is a term in Yiddish, which makes no sense, but what it means is you didn't put a drop of effort in. But when we do put our effort in, big sky is the limit for what human beings can create and what we can accomplish. And that's why, by the way, Rashi made a special emphasis that the name of the rabbi in the Medrash that said this statement about human beings being created after animals, his name was Rabbi Simloi. Why Rabbi Simloi? Rabbi Simloi was not a guy who came from some illustrious rabbinic, right? He's not from Hillel's family. He's not from Rabbi Gamliel's family. He's not from Yehuda Nasi's family. He was a guy who on his own, a Jewish guy, but he was interested in learning Torah. He became devoted to Torah. He wasn't even mentioned in the chronology of Jewish sages. He was a student, right? Rabbi Yochanan didn't even want to welcome him into certain aspects of the yeshiva. That's why Rabbi Simloi is the one that said it, because he knew everything that Rabbi Simloi came with his effort. He wasn't a trustafarian. He didn't get any money from his grandparents and his parents and never worked a day in his life. He didn't get his Torah scholarship or his connection to the sages through, family lineage. He was a nobody like Rabbi Akiva, who said, you know what, I'm going to learn, and I'm going to learn as if I'm giving every fiber of my being to it, knowing that nothing was handed to me. I'm going to put in the Cerusal de Lotata. I'm going to put in my internal, tireless effort. And that's who he became, who he was. And that's why he's quoted as the one that's saying, you know why humans come after animals? Because it's a double-edged sword. He knew the beauty of humans being after animals. He knew that humans have the ability to do incredible things with their own effort, but he also understood that giving them the freedom to make that choice always has risks. Right? Everyone's talking now about who has nukes. Could someone please tell me why anyone needs nukes? Why does anyone on earth need a weapon of mass destruction? Take it away from everyone. Who needs it? That's why we're going to live in a world where to every person that has their finger on a button can threaten the whole world with their fasholtna, with their cursed nukes. So what human beings are capable of choosing evil and sickness and depravity, that's real. And Rabbi Simloi, coming from a blue-collar home, he knew that. But he also knew that if you give the ganze fire, but the ganze neshama, if you give it all, everything you've got, Tazria, not Isha, not woman, but Tazria, you will see conception, you will see birth, you will see creativity, because you're giving what you can and what you have to create a bright and beautiful future for yourself, those around you in the world. So back to my original question. Are humans superior or inferior to animals? The real answer is?
Sometimes one,
depends.
sometimes the
It's
other.
a good Jewish answer. Depends. No, but this is
in law school.
in law school. She says in law school too. It's not just in rabbinic school. But it really depends. If you live like a Jew, you live like a good human being, you're being productive, you're not sitting like a cow and you sit in the field the whole day, checking to see did any grass grow here, grass grow there. The whole day you're busy with the grass. There's more. You're mission oriented. You're looking for productivity and making good choices, positive life choices. You do that, you knock the animals out of the park, and then you were the reason that you came last was not because you're negative, on the contrary, because you're the guest of honor. You're worthy of being the guest of honor because you're living up to what it means to be a creation of God, to be created by Yitzir Kapov, like Adam, who was literally handcrafted by God. But when you choose negative, when you choose unholy, you're not only equal to an animal, you're way, way inferior than mosquitoes. Because you are choosing evil. Animals don't choose evil. Humans choose evil. And so tonight our message is as we get ready for this incredible holiday of Pesach, this incredible Yontif that's coming up in 2 weeks and 2 days. We're going to usher in Zman Cheruseinu, the time of our exodus, the time of our freedom. Let us be free. I know in America we love using the word freedom for everything. We have freedom truckers, freedom fighters, freedom fries. I still remember when we were doing freedom fries after 9/11. We didn't want to call it French fries. We called them freedom fries. Everything in America is about freedom. But we're a Yidden. What does freedom mean for a Jew? Freedom to be you. And what does it mean to be a Yid? To choose, b'charta b'chayim, choose life. Isarusa dilatata. Maybe we should make plaques. Everyone should hang in their house called Isarusa dilatata, which means the effort that comes from below. It's not gifted to you. It's not handed to you. God doesn't drop it on you with some super duper divine energy. It's the work that we put in, the hardship that we face, and we say, oh, it's so tempting to choose evil. It's so tempting to choose trafe. It's so tempting to choose unholiness. But you know what? I'm better than an animal. I have the ability to make intellectual choices. Not just emotional, instinctive choices, but intellectual choices. I'm going to choose to have a relationship with Melech Malachim, with Almighty God, and therefore merit that all of creation was worthy to have a man or woman like ourselves who's ready to make the hard choices, to be a beacon and an ambassador of goodness. So instead of spending your life kvetching about all those that choose evil, just be an ambassador for goodness. And that in itself will slowly change the world, whether you're in Boise or in Belfry or in Cedar City or in Los Angeles or in Chicago and Norway and Puerto Rico. It should be a preparation. This should be an incredible part of our prep work, our inner prep work, so that when Pesach comes, we haven't only cleaned and cleansed our homes from the physical leaven, from the physical chametz, but we clean our souls from the leaven, from the arrogance, from the unholiness, from the temptation, from the garbage that sits in and rots our inner core. So when Pesach comes, we're not only, okay, we made sure to get, you have to make sure to get rid of every little crumb in your house, but what about all the crumbs in your heart, in your soul? You know, when we burn the chametz, it's a beautiful prayer. I don't have a siddur in front of me, so I'm going to do it from memory. There's a beautiful prayer we say when we're burning the chametz, that just like we're burning this physical chametz, may we burn all the inner chametz that we have in our heart and soul. It's a beautiful Geshem Shebiarti, Achametz Bibesi, Mershusi. So too may all the satanic, right, the Satan. People always ask me, Rabbi, the Jews believe in the Satan. They're like, what do you think made it up? What do you mean? It's ours. What do you mean? You can't take it away from us, right? The Gemara says, that Satan, the angel of death, and the evil inclination are all the same entity. It's all one. The angel of death, the Satan, the evil inclination. But let's rid our system, our inner system, from that, so that when we sit at the Seder in 2 weeks and 2 days, we're not only celebrating the story of the exodus of our ancestors, we're celebrating our own inner exodus, that we've redeemed ourselves and freed ourselves from so much of the toxicity, the spiritual, emotional, mental, physical toxicity that exists in our life. And by the way, one of the ways to do that is a commercial message. Shoot a bullet in your TV, blow up your TV, and then you'll solve a lot of your inner toxicity. And we should merit the ultimate rid of humanity's toxicity. As the prophet says, the spirit of impurity will be eradicated, will blow out of the earth with the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu, with the arrival of our righteous Mashiach. May be spilling in our days. Amen. And we'll see you back here, God willing, next week for another pre-Pesach energetic talk. I don't know what the weather will be like next Wednesday. Actually, as the sun set, it got a little chilly out here. It was way more impressive 45 minutes ago. But either way, it was great to see you here, and we'll see you back here soon. Sei gesund. And for those of you watching on Zoom, thank you, Jim. Anyone that wants to, on Zoom, we're still on Zoom. Any questions, any comments? Linda, Chagai, Margot, Ruth. Made it through? No? Go, you have to unmute yourself, Linda. Oh, here, 1 second, Linda. Try now.
Unmute.
Oh,
Okay. Okay. All right. I just had a sense when you were speaking that maybe one of the reasons why we were created last was also because maybe God refined us as maybe in his image. So we were refined. We are told that we were made in God's image, but we have that choice to choose good or evil. And so when we choose good and we fulfill God's wishes for ourselves, that's what we were put on this earth to do.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question. I think, and it's one of those things where there really isn't. It's not like just because we say everything, depends. This one really depends on what choices we make.
Right.
And we could be the best thing that ever happens to God's world, and we literally can be the worst thing that ever happens to God's world. Human beings, the way God created us, it's to take nuclear energy in itself. The Rebbe spoke about this in the early 80s. Nuclear this thing for human beings because it could give energy to billions of people, or it could be used by a madman. The Rebbe said this I think in 1981. It could be used by a madman. I don't know exactly which madman was in 81. I'm sure there was someone around. But the point is that everything that's in this world can be used by human beings for positive or negative, and that's all in our hands. And that's a big responsibility, but also a reflection of the inferiority versus the superiority of what the human condition is capable of.
Right.
Chagai, Margot?
Yeah, it's like with the internet. It started out like a good thing, but look what's happening now.
I
Yeah.
agree. And by the way, you know who runs the internet? Human beings. No, human beings.
Yeah,
That's why there's either incredible classes like us sitting on Zoom, or there's people using internet for evil, for sick things.
yeah.
That's the human choice.
Okay, we'll
Okay.
get a puppy.
Get a puppy. Sei gesund. Have a good night.